Okay, let's get started. Now we are discuss about the Poetics by Aristotle, part 24. Again, epic poetry must have as many kinds as tragedy. It must be simple or complex or ethical or pathetic. The parts also with the expectation of song and spectacle are the same. For it requires reversal of the situation, recognitions, and scene of sufferings. Moreover, the thought and the diction must be artistic. In all these respects, Homer is our earliest and sufficient model. Indeed, each of his poems has a twofold character. The Iliad is at once simple and pathetic, and the Odyssey, complex for recognition scenes run through it, and at the same time ethical. Moreover, in diction and thoughts, they are supreme. Epic poetry differs from tragedy in the scale on which it's constructed and in its meter. As regards scale or length, we have already laid down an adequate limit. The beginning and the end must be capable of being thought within a single view. This condition will be satisfied by poem on a smaller scale than the old epics and answering in length to the group of tragedies presented at a single setting. Epic poetry has, however, agreed a special capacity for enlarging its dimensions, and we can see the reason. In tragedy, we cannot imitate revival lines of action carried on at one and the same time. We must confine ourselves to the action on the stage and the part taken by the players. But in epic poetry, owing to the narrative form, many events stimulously transcended, transcended can be presented, and these, if relevant to the subject and add mass and dignity to the poem. The epic has here on an adventure advantage and one that conduces to grandeur of effect, to diverting the mind of the hearer and reliving the story with topics for sameness of incidents soon produce stately and makes tragedies fail on the stage. As for the meter, the heroic Myers has proved its fitness by the test of experience. If a narrative poem in any other meter or in many meter were no compounds, it would be found incongruous. For of all Myers, the heroic is the statalistic and the most massive, and hence it most readily admits rare words and metaphors, which is another point in which the narrative form of imitation stands alone. On the other hand, the iambic and the tor- tetrameter or staring Myers, the latter being a to to dancing, the former expressive of action. Still more observed would it be to mix together different meters, as was done by Jerome Cheromon. Hence, no one has ever composed a poem on a great scale in any others than heroic verse. Nature hears. Nature herself, as we have said, teach the choice of the proper measures. Homer, admirable in all respects, has the special merit of being the only poet who rightly appreciates the part of he should take himself. The poet should speak as little as possible in his own person, for it's not that that makes him an imitator. Other poets appeared themselves upon the scenes throughout and imitate but little and really. Homer, after a few prefatory word at once bring in a man or woman or other personage, none of them wanting in characteristic qualities, but each with a character of his own. The element of the wonderful is required in tragedy. The irrational or on which the wonderful depends for its chief effects has wider scope in epic poetry because there the person acting is not seen. Thus, the pursuit of Hector would be ludicrous if placed upon the stage. The Greeks, the Greeks standing still and not joining in the pursuit, and Achilles having them back. But in the epic poem, the absurdity passes unnoticed. No, the wonderful is pleasing at maybe infer from the fact that everyone tells a story with some additions of his own, knowing that his hearers like it. It is Homer who has chiefly taught other poets the art of telling lies skillfully. The secret of it lies in a fallacy for assuming that if one thing is or becomes, a second is or becomes. Men imagine that if the second is, the first likewise is or become. But this is a false inference. Hence, where the first thing is untrue, it's quite unnecessary provided the second be true. To add that the first is or has become, for the mind knowing the second to be true falsely infers the truth of the first. This is an example of this is the bath scene of the Odyssey. According the poet, should refer probables impossibilities to improbable possibilities. The tragic plot must not be composed of irrational parts. Everything irrational should, if possible, be excluded, or at all events, it should lie outside the action of the play. As in the Oedipus, the hero's ignorance as to the home manner of liar's death, not within the drama, as in the Electra, the messenger's account of the Parthians games, or as in the Messenians, the man who has come from Tigia to Messia and is still speechless. The play that otherwise the plot would have been renewed is ridiculous. Such a plot should not, in the first instance, be constructed. But once the irrational has been introduced and an air of likelihood imparted to it, we must accept it in spite of the absurdity. Take even the irrational incidents in the Odyssey, where Odysseus is left upon the shore of Thalakia, Ithakia, Ithakia. How intolerable even these might have been would be apparent if an inferior poet were to treat the subject as its the absurdity is veiled by the poetic charm with which the poet invests it. The diction should be elaborated in the pauses of the action, where there is no expressions of character or thought. For conversely, character and thought are merely obscured by our diction that is over brilliant. Okay, do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.